Tonight on Byline. The nanny state, literally. Yesterday, we questioned the need for the government to babysit your kids, and wow, did it cause a stir. Wait until you see some of the emails we got. Peta, those wackos never cease to amaze me. Their latest idea, vegan food for cats. We've got the latest in extreme environmentalism. Red alert. China and Pakistan working together against the West. This is not good. And the Olsen twins, like you've never seen them before and may never want to see them again. This is Byline. Ending the entitlement culture, that's the topic of tonight's Byline. When I read you the email we received, the one spelling out the need for a national government-run daycare system so that kids wouldn't be deprived of international travel, and then spoke to an advocate for such a system, well, you responded, and you responded as I expected you would. But while most of you, like most Canadians, told tales of sacrificing for your children, doing without so that you could do what you felt was best for your families, others were again lashing out to protect the entitlement culture and evangelize for the entitlement mentality. A fellow named George Wynot, identified on Twitter as an NDP and Labour activist, posted this. At Brian Lilley, such a jackass. I'm shocked you have a show on TV. Not everyone is as well off as you. And he calls me a word that I'll let you read because I'm not going to say it. All this because I said we don't need a government-funded national daycare program. On the blog, lillyspad.ca, Elaine wrote to say, I have no clue what I'm talking about when it comes to kids in daycare. She said, Brian, let me guess, you are a single chap with no kids. Typical for somebody like you to write about families, kids, etc. You should really stick to things you know about, like having fun, bars, nice cards. I think she meant cars, but I'm not going to correct her spelling. And fancy vacations. Perhaps you should hook up with your married friend, if you have any, and ask them how realistic it is nowadays to raise a family on one income. She then goes on to complain about the arts tax credit for children, as if that's something I've ever defended. Now, not to get too personal, which of course means I'm going to get personal. When I write or broadcast about family issues and say we don't need a big, national, unionized, government-run daycare system, the reply inevitably comes that either I don't have kids or I'm rich. Here's news for you. I have a wife, 4 kids, a dog, 2 cats, and 1 income earner. Me. It's been that way for most of the time my wife and I have had our children, and no, I'm not rich. When my twins were born, that's the last of our 4 kids, we had 4 children under the age of 4, 3 of them in diapers. I was earning less than $40,000 a year, and I had to feed, house, and clothe 6 people. We were living in Ottawa, where the average family income at the time was just shy of $80,000, and most families have only 2 kids. So yes, double the kids, less than half the income. We scraped by, we made sacrifices, we found a way to make it work. I wasn't making enough money, so I took on 3 jobs at one point, just so I could earn extra money by writing for other outlets. That's life. Oh, and to the critics, yes, even back then, I questioned the government of the day and Finance Minister John Manley about the need for a national daycare program. I remember once asking Manley why the government was taxing the crap out of families and then turning around and mailing them checks every month to help with expenses. I knew this was happening because I was getting the crap taxed out of me and then having the government mail me a check. That's nuts. Why not just cut the taxes so that people can pay for stuff themselves, I asked Manley. He looked at me like I had 3 heads. People want to look after themselves, and if they can't, neighbors and family should step in to help first. Government can come after. We don't need the government, and you've got to convince your friends, family, and co-workers about this. If we're going to end the entitlement culture, you can do this. We can survive, and so can the vulnerable in our society without always creating a big new government program. On the front page of Monday's Toronto Sun was a story about Don Smith, a man who used to get his wheelchairs paid for by the government. But once he turned 65, he had to raise some of the money himself, and Don didn't have the money. Now, while the story was about the need for the government to fix the situation, the end result was people, many who didn't even know him, people stepped up to the plate, donating enough money to pay for the chair.
So, I don't know if you can see this number here. Can you read that number at all? It says $6,100. Now, about $6,000 is probably what you need to be able to replace your chair, right? So I think you're going to be able to get it done a little faster than you thought. Isn't that amazing? People can be pretty amazing, eh?
Yes, they can, and I love the smile on Don's face there. We can do this, people. We can do it without the ever-expanding government. And you know what? Acts like this build up communities and they make people feel good. And that's what we need to be focusing on. And that's the byline. Well, yesterday we brought you a conversation with an advocate for daycare, government-run, national unionized childcare center, big institutional thing. She wasn't too comfortable talking to me, but she came in nonetheless. Today, we bring in somebody who argues the other side. She's a familiar face, Andrea Mrozik with Institute for Marriage and Family Canada. Andrea, one of the things that kept coming up yesterday and that keeps coming up is that we've got to have, I think the activists call it quad. Any daycare program has to be quad. You know, you got to come up with an acronym like this. So it's got to be quality, universal, affordable, and I forget the
developmental.
Developmental. See, if I'd gone to daycare, I would have known that. I would have known the big words. But universal program, I went and looked up what the average family makes in 2009. It's the latest numbers I have for StatsCan. $85,000 for a two-earner family with children. And that's what we're talking about, because people say, well, you know, mom's got to work too, and dad's got to work, so we need to have a universal daycare program. The average income is $85,000. That's not too shabby.
It's not too shabby, and I hate to bring up the example of Quebec again, but I will do it anyway. In Quebec,
oh no, bash the Quebec program, because I lived under it, and it's not what the Toronto Star, what the Red Star tells people it is.
One of the unfortunate realities there, when we look at trying to be compassionate to families who can't afford daycare, is that middle-income earners have had greater success accessing their system. So essentially, then you do have the families earning a decent, more than decent salary, wage, $80,000 annually, with greater accessibility for the daycare program in Quebec. So again,
So the people that it's designed to help, the people that we would all say, you know what, single mother, scraping by, not making a lot of money, maybe going to school, upgrading her skills, like a neighbor of mine not that long ago, they need the help, and everyone says give them the help. But it's really the comfortable people that are having the easiest access to this system.
Well, activists in favor of a national daycare program can't have it both ways. What the major principle, one of those quad principles, is universality. That means that it's going to be going to a person making $1 million a year, and it's going to be going to a person who isn't even taxed because they make so little. Universality means everyone gets it. The vast majority, thank goodness, of Canadians are not poverty-stricken. And so we are, in a sense, then, giving this program to people who could otherwise pay for it themselves. And that's the reality of universality. It cannot be any other way. The Institute of Marriage and Family Canada has said in the past that targeted programs for those who are truly in need are important, and that's something that a compassionate society can look at, and we can debate what that might look like. But what does not work is to somehow declare that every single Canadian across this country is in need of assistance from the government. And that is, in a sense, what activists for national daycare are saying.
Now, before we run out of time, one of the other things they say is that we've got to have this so kids can get a head start in life so that they can learn, and without this, things are going to be very difficult. They won't advance as quickly. The research doesn't back that up, does it? Or at least it's split.
The research has always been done on small targeted populations. A lot of the studies that activists are using have shown improvements for children, but they were for small targeted populations. So when you then take that and extrapolate and say we're going to do this for the entire province of Ontario, the entire country, for example, that is no longer a good research premise to use for that type of program. It worked for the very disenfranchised in the Perry Preschool Project. This is one of the frequently cited studies.
This is the one out of Chicago.
I'm not sure if it's Chicago, so I don't want to get that wrong, but it's in America, yes, in the States, and they did a small targeted study and showed improvements for very disadvantaged children. I might also add they worked with the mothers, and it was an extraordinary investment that they put into those children, and perhaps rightly so. But we would not be doing that with every single one of Ontario's children.
Or every kid across the country.
Or every kid across the country. Quite simply, it would be way too expensive, and at the end of the day, somebody pays for it, and it's you and me. All
right. Andrew Mrozik, thank you.
Thank you.
Make sure you stick around. More straight talk, more entitlement culture coming your way.
The Canadian government has reduced their corporate income tax to 18%. It's going to 15%. I've had companies that I've called on in Chicago to come to Iowa, said, we like Iowa, but if they don't change the federal corporate income tax, we're probably going to go to Canada. Now, that's a tragedy when now Canada is beating us, and they have a stronger, and also their financial system is stronger too, because they've been more conservative in the way they've handled loans in the past.
But they discovered massive amounts of oil in Canada, though. That has a lot to do with the Canadian economy.
And the Obama administration won't let us use it.
There you go. The governor of Iowa, Terry Branstad, talking about how strong Canada is. Of course, a lot of eyes on Iowa because of the U.S. presidential race ramping up, but yet somebody else saying that the Obama administration could learn from dear old boring Canada. That's the subject of Mark Bonokoski's national editorial in Sun newspapers across the country today. Mark joins us now. Mark,
I still laugh though when Gregory, the moderator, tries to cut him off of stolen the virtues of Canada by saying, yeah, but they just discovered massive amounts of oil, as if that happened yesterday.
Yeah, well, we've had the oil for ages, and guess what? They've got tons of oil as well.
I think our oil is probably the same age as their oil.
Yeah, I think so. And Obama won't let them drill. They can't drill in Alaska. They can't drill offshore. He has stopped drilling projects elsewhere on the continental United States.
No, but when I see the moderators trying to make it sound as if the only reason Canada is in good straits is because it's got an oil-based industry.
Well, I just bring that up because they'd be doing better if they did their own. So you're gloating a little bit in your editorial today, saying, ha, 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 we're doing all right.
Well, I'm not gloating, but it's very rare. I think precedent-setting. I've watched Meet the Press for years, and never have I seen a guest, of course, and a guest like the governor of a state, extolling such praise on Canada for its fiscal management. It's unprecedented, and it was out of the blue too. There was no questions being put to the governor about Canada, and Canada's name had not even come up. They were just talking about growing jobs and how to create jobs, and he brought up Canada's corporate tax rate, going from 18 to 15, and people he called in Chicago to say, come on down to Iowa. We got a good place for you to live and raise your kids. And they're saying, yeah, I'd love to go. We love Iowa too, but unless you get a better corporate tax rate in the United States, we're going up to north of the 49.
Well, one that the Harper government crowed about and a lot of Canadians cheered on was Tim Hortons coming back to Canada. They moved their corporate head offices. Of course, they'd been bought by Wendy's, then they were spun off. Their corporate head office is technically located in Delaware. They brought them all back home because the business climate was better. Now, I know the chattering classes here in Ottawa and probably in Rosedale and Toronto and elsewhere sneer at that because they sneer at Tim Hortons, but that's a good sign when a company that big says there's a good thing going on there.
Well, absolutely it is, but when the editorial was posted online, of course you get all the anti-kind of capitalists weighing in, and they don't equate corporate business tax with jobs. They'll say, big corporate business won't create jobs if they get more profit. What they'll do is just give themselves bigger bonuses and get bigger jets. And I mean, that's the kind of subliminal hatred of capitalism and big business that is out there.
Well, let me tell you something.
But some businesses actually do go out and create jobs when they get some profits going.
But let me just address that, Mark, and then I'm going to start hammering the Harper government on spending. But let's say that you own the company and you make big profits, and instead of creating jobs with it for people that maybe you can't expand your business anymore, so you buy a nice big jet. Guess what? You got to hire a pilot, you got to hire a ground crew, or pay a company that does it. You're creating jobs.
Well, I suppose
for the guys that build the bloody plane.
Yeah, I know, Brian, but what they're talking, that
doesn't make any sense to them because they don't like it.
What the governor of Iowa was talking about were I think shovels in ground kind of jobs and jobs assembly line kind of jobs, that kind of thing. Not the peripheral jobs for the rich, and that's why he said, unless the United States lowers its corporate income tax, jobs, real jobs, are going to go north. I mean,
absolutely. Now it's been bringing in lowering corporate taxes brings in more revenue. Proven fact. But I still say the Harper government is spending too much. The reason they're able to spend, they've cut taxes, they've kept the economy going, revenue has gone up despite all their tax cuts, and they're spending too much. If we can bring up the list of government agencies and departments, still not a full list. I've posted it at lillyspad.ca.
Yeah, I think there's over 300 of them, is there not?
You just scroll through. I haven't counted yet because I'm still trying to find. I know there's more. You scroll through them all. Look at them all. You can go on there, check them out, click through, go to their website, see if they're useful. I went on one, the Canadian Polar Commission. And you say, oh, well, we're a polar nation. We have to have a polar commission. The front page of their website has a penguin on it. What pole are they looking after?
Yes, of course. I haven't seen many penguins north of 60. Have you?
No, we own a construction company to build stuff for the Department of National Defense, as opposed to somebody that just goes in and manages the contractors. They actually have their own contractor. We have a Farm Credit Canada that's there to loan out farmers. Surely some of these things are not necessary, Mark. We could scupper them and help Jim Flaherty find $4 billion or more in savings.
What about the Canadian Race Relations Foundation? That, for example, the Canadians gave $12 million in seed money to, who wants to eliminate whiteness. I mean, I've got one of their printouts here. It talks about racism and racial discrimination. Whereas racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance derive directly from a perception of superiority of whiteness and the accumulation of wealth of a minority at the detriment of the majority. I mean, it's very socialist, very anti-white, therefore you would say racist.
Yeah, well, I read that as pretty racist. Now, their claim is, one, they don't get any more government money. They're living off the interest from the millions we gave them, and two, that's old. So what? It's still on your website.
It is.
And you're still being listed as a government agency. They should be scrapped. They should give the money back because now they got $24 million in the bank from investing the millions we gave them before.
But there's lots of room for Harper to cut in this thing. No, but he's been saddled the last 5 years by being a minority prime minister. And the 33,000 jobs that grew in the public service are a direct result of appeasing the NDP and the Bloc, if you can use the word appeasement anymore without referring to Nazism. But it was used to appease them. Now we got 33,000 jobs, I would say surplus. Plus you got that list you've just shown of 300 plus agencies that you can go through them with a fine-tooth comb. And if you can't find 10% cut in each and every one of them, something's wrong with your auditor.
I would say so. Now, I got it very quickly. If you can give me 10, 20-second thoughts on Gilles Duceppe getting $150,000 almost a year in pension from you and I. Now he's on the taxpayers' dole again because he's being a commentator for the state broadcaster
in Quebec.
Radio Canada.
In Quebec. But how much are they pay him? Do we know?
The estimate is between $50,000 and $100,000 retainer, depending on how often he appears.
Well, Quebec, of course, he wouldn't be anywhere else but in Quebec. It's the hotbed for, René Lévesque was there before him. There's a number of separatists and nationalist commentators on there now. It just shows you the CBC doesn't give two hoots about Canada as a whole. And Radio Canada, for particular, is solely Quebec. I know there's no Radio Ontario that I know of that just deals with Ontario.
Well, people aren't watching them because they're watching our French sister station. Mark Bonokoski, thanks for coming in.
You're always welcome.
Stick around, more coming your way. Another sad child star story, or are they successful business partners? You decide. Wait until you see the latest from Mary-Kate and Ashley. Peta goes completely mental, more mental than before. They say even your pets shouldn't eat meat. You've got to hear this. But next, our judges and their war on reality, it continues. They think they're better than you. They're not. We'll show you that. This is Byline.
My name is Fellebrett, and I landed on Juno Beach with the Queen's Own Rifles of Canada. An RB company drifted in front of a German pillbox, and it caused heavy casualties before they finally knocked it out.
If you're a veteran of the Second World War and want to share your story, please contact the Memory Project. Join the legacy.
In the Sun this morning, one law for the land. That's Public Safety Minister Vic Taves. He says that includes immigration cases, one law for the land. An ongoing dispute between cabinet ministers in the Harper government and Supreme Court Justice Beverly McLaughlin, who kind of slapped down Jason Kenney for a speech he gave last winter, where he said if the judiciary, if the courts didn't get on side, any reform that Parliament passed was going to be for naught because they keep making up strange rules. Well, the justice's comments came just as a judge in Winnipeg retroactively lowered a man's sentence so that he could appeal his deportation order. Lawyer Richard Kurland follows immigration matters closely, joins us from Vancouver. Richard, you see a lot of crazy cases and you comment on a lot of them, but had you ever seen anything like the Winnipeg case where the judge said, "Oh, you know, I know you already served your time. I know you got a lot of convictions for you, but let's retroactively lower that so that you meet the conditions for appealing your deportation order"?
Actually, I've seen that before in other provinces, but never at the level of a Court of Appeal decision. And it draws down to maybe a lack of training on the part of either the prosecution or defense counsel when dealing with criminal matters and immigrants. It was a really simple thing for the sentencing judge at the time to be made aware of the dramatic variation if you're sentenced to 2 years plus a day or 2 years minus a day. And the reason the case succeeded on appeal was equally simple. The convicted fellow made the argument that, hello, 2 years plus a day means I don't have appeal rights, which may or may not be a bad thing, depending on your point of view. But the main thing is that the sentencing judge was unaware of this distinction. The appeal people said you're entitled to a fair shot. That means 2 years minus a day, and welcome to Canada for the time required to entertain your appeal.
That is a distinction, I think, lost on an awful lot of people who say 2 years less a day, 2 years plus a day. The guy was going away for fraud and other convictions, and he should be booted out of the country. And instead, we're going to be suckers, and we put him up for 2 years in jail. Not a Canadian citizen, put him up for 2 years in jail, let him get out, pay for his appeal. We're going to pay for his Immigration and Refugee Board appeal. It's going to keep going on, and this, I don't think this gentleman will be out of the country for a very long time, if ever. And I think that's the type of thing that continues to drive Canadians nuts about the system, that makes the Harper government's point when they say it's broken and we are trying to fix it.
That's all true, and the public's outrage was translated into harsher rules when it came to immigrants and crime, hence the 2 year plus 1 day equals no appeal deal. And these tiny cases that appear to fall between the cracks do not require policy change, do not require a change in the law. What it does require is upgrades on the education side. Should we be harsher on immigrants when it comes to criminality? I don't think that can be humanly possible at this juncture, because Canada has some of the most draconian rules in Western democratic societies, rightly so, when dealing with strangers living in our borders. One hit as a foreign national and you're out. And here's the most recent case, is where you had a member of the clergy, 5 years or so in Canada, gets a DUI. Unfortunately, having a drunk driving conviction means you're inadmissible to this country criminally as a foreign national. And the fellow, even though member of the clergy, did great work from Guatemala, teaching in Toronto, helping the community, was kicked out. So we're tough on crime right now. Can we be tougher? The only way we can be tougher is to educate, pay money to educate our judges.
I'm not sure, because you look at the cases such as, let me grab his name, Van Thang Yang, 43, out of Cambridge, came to Canada, committed a violent armed robbery, was ordered deported. Before he was deported, he ended up on dialysis. We paid $65,000 a year for his dialysis. He was given a kidney transplant. He had more convictions after he was ordered deported. He's still here, and judges are saying, no, you can't deport him because he might not be able to afford his medication quite as easily in Vietnam. You come to the country, you follow the laws, and you become a citizen. If you become a citizen and you are involved in crime after you become a citizen, we can't kick you out, and that's as it should be. But if you're not a citizen, why are we keeping you here? To cause criminal problems.
And in cases from Vietnam, the classic reason why we, Canada, could not remove is because of the government of Vietnam. They would not accept the person back. They would not, or resist, issuing travel documents. So you can't blame CBSA or CIC or Canada when Vietnam was the root source in being unable to export their criminal citizens here in Canada.
So you're saying that we're already tough enough, we don't need to get tougher, it's just a case of making sure everyone knows the rules? That's
well,
it?
I think that with a luster. We need an additional layer of resources to effectively enforce Canada's immigration law. In order to remove people expeditiously, when it's appropriate, we need boots on the ground, not in some faraway place, but right here in Canada to enforce Canadian law. And I'll tell you, the faster that you can effect a removal, the lower the cost it is for Canada, and the more justice that the law and order community across the whole country will feel is being done. So boots on the ground in Canada where it counts.
All right, Richard Kurland, thank you.
Pleasure.
Make sure you stick around. We've got more on the way. Mary-Kate and Ashley, ooh, they just won't go away. Now they're channeling Michelle Tanner. I think it's rather bad. Later, why should you be very concerned about the relationship between China and Pakistan? But right after the break, Peta, they've hit a brand new low. The animal lovers want to kill animals as a way to save animals. It's confusing. We'll break it down for you. This is Byline.
We are in a very dire situation in ecological terms. More than 90% of the fish in the ocean have been wiped out.
You remember Eric McBay from Deep Green. His book also claims 90% of the fish gone, 98% of grasslands gone, 97% of native forests destroyed. It's all in Deep Green resistance. Of course, none of it footnoted to back it up and say, here's the study where we prove this. Why? Because it's really a manifesto for environmental radicalism. This is what happens when people go too far, is deep green resistance. People taking the environmental cause and just going a little loopy with it. Loopy is also how I would describe this next story, and it's related to environmental nuttiness. People deciding that, you know, a lot of people who care deeply about the environment won't eat meat because they don't want to hurt the planet. And some even go so far as to not eat milk or cheese or eggs, so they become vegans. Well, some vegans are deciding they're going to feed their cats vegan meals. Yeah, cats! You know, the ones that eat the mouse in your kitchen? Apparently that's all bad. Kris Sims follows this story for us here now and joins us. Kris, you wrote about this in the paper this morning. Who does this?
Vegans do. Not all vegans, I must be clear, but people who follow PETA and PETA's recommendations, who are vegans, do this. I put out an all-points bulletin to my Green Party friends, and some of them got back to me, indeed, with some of their friends who feed vegan diets to their cats.
This is recommended by PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
That's right.
Okay, which is a bizarre group. I think they're poorly named, but they say feed your cats vegan diet. Okay, why and what does it do to the cats?
Their thinking is, why, kill and grind up other animals just to feed an animal that you happen to know and happen to keep in your house? By the way, they don't call them pets, they call them companion animals, and they're kind of opposed to the whole idea. But if you're going to keep a cat captive in your house, apparently you should feed it a vegan diet. And they're proclaiming that you can feed them this special kibble now that is made up of all vegetable matter, and they've had taurine, which is a special element that cats require basically to live, that you usually only get from eating meat. They've claimed that they can artificially synthesize this. So a bunch of plant matter with a bunch of additives stuck to it, and the cat will do just fine.
Do you know what happens when my cat eats plant matter? It pukes it up all over the house. I'm sorry to be gross. I'm being a little rough around the edges today, but I used to bring my wife flowers. You know why I don't anymore? The cat eats them, then throws up on the dining room table where you've put the nice vase of flowers. Why? Because they can't handle this stuff.
That's right. Their digestive systems are not made to digest plant matter, period. And every veterinarian that I spoke with, including zoologists and biologists, said this is crazy. You can't give an obligate carnivore, which means you must eat meat, cat, vegetables. You can't make them eat this and expect them to survive. They're warning that if you feed this to them long term, they might bump along for a little while, but on the long term, they're going to suffer organ failure and have shortened lifespans.
And so these cats are dying. Cats will live 20, 25 years. 15 is a short lifetime for a cat. These cats are living, what, 6 to 8 years?
That's what these veterinarians are warning will happen. It's hard to get actual stats on this because, frankly, vets don't keep track of this sort of thing. It's not a stats can issue, but those who I actually spoke with are quite worried about it.
I think my cat would kick me if I did this to scratch me. Let's bring up some of the comments, because you've been getting some great comments on TorontoSun.com and the other websites this is published on. Find your local Sun paper. The story should be there. So here's one from Chuck 2011. In fact, my cat this very morning told me he's not giving up meat. PETA notwithstanding, he went on to say there's nothing like a fresh mouse for lunch. Next comment. Dave McNamara says, I think they should send all their top representatives to into the wilds of Africa to try and convince the lions and other wild cats they'd prefer vegetarian diets. How do you think that'd go, Kris?
Yeah, slurp. Yeah.
Sun Watcher, one fine day, a scientist will proclaim that plants can feel pain, and then these nutters are going to be totally screwed. Reminds me, there's a Hugh Grant movie, I'm trying to remember which one, where he was dating a girl that was a fruitarian, only ate fruit that fell to the ground. Dan Johnson, not Don Johnson from Miami Vice, but Dan Johnson writes, I want a bunch of PETA followers to go jump into a Shark Tank and tell them all what they're eating is wrong. Please, it's the only thing I want for Christmas. And I think we have one more. Neil Ryan writes, plants are living creatures. To destroy one creature to feed another is murder. I call on all moral and ethical vegans to halt the practice of plant genocide. I think Neil's tongue is firmly implanted in his cheek there.
That reminds me of the Simpsons episode where Lisa's new boyfriend says that he's like a 7th level vegan, doesn't eat anything that casts a shadow. So eventually we're going to run out of stuff to eat.
I think so. Carrots would cast a shadow. They have the carrot top, so you can't even eat those. You're reduced to potatoes and not even milk. So, welcome back to the Irish famine, thanks to vegans. Kris Sims, thanks for following this and for coming in today.
You're welcome.
We've got more Straight Talk coming your way. Remember Full House? Remember the Olsen twins? We've got them like you've never seen them before. It's doubtful some of you will ever want to see them again. But before that, I find this Chai-Com-Pakistan relationship concerning, and you should too. Shuv Majumdar coming by to break it down for us. This is Byline. Every week we try and check in with the man that knows all about foreign affairs. Shuv Majumdar joins us now. You're in Washington today, Shuv.
I am. How are you?
I'm doing well. Much chatter about Pakistan and China in Washington, because the news breaking in the Financial Times that Pakistan's apparently showing off parts of the stealth helicopter that the Americans used to sneak in and double tap Osama bin Laden. They're showing it off to the Chinese, who are taking pictures and presumably sending it back to a factory at home to start making copies.
They also took a sample of this stealth skin that was used on these 2 Black Hawk helicopters that was used on the strike on Osama bin Laden. It's a really concerning trend. I mean, let's look at China for a second here. They're the ones who stepped up in Pakistan after the United States suspended their $800 million procurement for the Pakistani army following the bin Laden raids. They're the ones who are also going through a leadership change inside their own political dynamic, embracing this notion of red culture, which brings them closer to Maoist principles, expansionist as they might be.
So
they're also the same country
hold on, before we go on up there, because you mentioned Mao, you know, all the people that hate us are going to freak out. But you're saying that they're going back towards the little red book sort of thing and away from the Chinese version of glasnost that we've been experiencing the last few years. They're going backwards, not forward.
Well, China's definitely going backwards in the sense of being a much more militarized country, but they're reaching further back than Mao. They're also revisiting the notion of a fortress fleet in the Chinese Ocean, in the Indian Ocean, by expanding out a perimeter through their combination of anti-ship ballistic missiles that have a 1,200-mile range. And their first aircraft carrier and even more naval supremacy. I mean, let's be honest, it'll take them some time before they reach the naval supremacy in the Pacific of the United States, but they're certainly being extremely bold about where they plan on being militarily as a nation and how they intend to pursue their interests with no values at the core of it beyond expanding access to Chinese to resources for China.
Now, we saw in the early days of the Harper government that they didn't want a whole lot to do with China. Trade still went up, but they thought, well, you know, we got to stand up for human rights, and Harper took flack on that. And I think a lot of the people that really love China are always pushing for China. One, you look at some of them, they've got strong business ties there, but they always portray it as a country that's just benign, that wants to sell us a load of crap to sell in dollar stores. It's not like that, is it? When you're out launching aircraft carriers named after the admiral that conquered Taiwan centuries ago. It's not a benign country anymore.
No, and I don't know if it's ever been a truly benign country. It's a big country, 1 billion people with a massive economy that's growing. There are some misnomers about when we look at China, though. You know, some people look at China as a booming economy, but they're providing labor to companies like Apple and others who actually maintain assets from their profits in American bank accounts, not in Chinese ones. They're experiencing a growing middle class, but their economy is vulnerable because it is dependent entirely on the kind of cheap labor that they're able to provide for the world as a service. And of course, they're pursuing resources to feed this billion-person population through the expansion of the largest welfare state on earth and the servitude that comes with it from citizens that depend on government for all aspects of their life. So China is becoming a very interesting player. They're at that crossroads of deciding what it means to be a major power. Are they going to be a mature major superpower, or are they going to be an immature major superpower? And they're being confronted with those questions when it comes to their policy in Pakistan or North Korea or in ASEAN more broadly in the Southeast Asian states and the economic linkages there. So China is a complex model that needs to be approached on a multidimensional level, on human rights, on trade, on political reform, and on pragmatic alliances that are required to preserve some notion of stability simply because of the behemoth of a country that it is.
Now, I want to ask you in a moment about Canada going back in some ways. You know, we brought back the royal designation for Navy and Air Force, but I don't want to leave Pakistan and China yet, because what does it say to us, just quickly, what does it say, again, about this notion that Pakistan is an ally, that we can work with them? They hid bin Laden. They have such turmoil in their government that their minorities minister gets shot dead in the street. This is a country where people are persecuted, where fanatical sections of their society are gaining a stronghold, and now they're cozying up to the Chinese and saying, here's the secret stuff that our allies, our supposed allies, don't want you to see.
Well, Pakistan, I think to long-term observers, astute ones, has always been a serious problem. They've been very effective at understanding how their operatives in intelligence and military on the ground in places like Afghanistan might communicate a particular need, and how their diplomats in places like Washington might communicate a different need. They understand how Western bureaucracy tends not to talk to one another, and how to exploit that to create a dependency around massive military procurements. The Pakistani military does not have respect for civilian control, the elected government of Pakistan, which places Pakistani elected governments in very precarious positions, searching for credibility and trying to ride the tiger every day of their administration. Pakistan has not been an ally for the West or for the notion of democracy in places like Afghanistan or sowing seeds of stability. Pakistan is still informed by the idea of a separation from India and trying to become some kind of mainstay to counterweight India as a rising power. But India has moved beyond, particularly in the last 10 years, as a direct result of liberalizing their markets and embracing the principles of democracy. And Pakistan as a country is in radical decline. Unfortunately, their government and their military don't represent a majority of their population, which are aligned around the principles of modernity, but they don't have a voice in the Pakistani process anymore. And that's one of the great tragedies of Pakistan. The people are our allies. The government is not, neither is the military.
So just quickly on our military, the idea of going back to the name Royal, I'm sure you heard about that today. Peter MacKay making it official. We're going to be at the Royal Canadian Navy again, Royal Canadian Air Force. Good, bad, and different. What say you?
Oh, fantastic. It's about time that we started to reverse the so-called liberalization of Canadian identity. There has been a corrosive and concerted effort over the last 30 to 40 years by one Liberal government after the next to try and rob Canada of its sense of history, of its allegiance to the Queen as part of our national identity and our great purpose in the world. And to see that Minister MacKay would take this direction is a very proud moment for a Canada that is fully confident in who it is, in its character. And I think it's a wonderful tribute to the troops who have fought and died under that banner.
All right. Shivlo Mijamder, thank you.
Great to be here, Brian. Thank you.
Make sure you stick around. More Straight Talk coming your way. From cute, successful child stars to not so cute, not quite as successful adults, the latest from the Olsen twins, and we'll just say it's interesting. This is Byline. You probably remember the show Full House, little saccharine sweet but oh so wholesome, and it had the Olsen twins in it. You remember those cute little girls? They went on to become fashion icons for little kids. Remember that? Watch this video. Well, that was the Olsen twins back when they just had to be cute. Now, apparently they're still going, and some people think that they're still cool. I don't know. Yeah, before they sold you their clothes by singing cute little songs, now they just splash water at each other. It's equivalent of a wet white t-shirt contest for stick girls. Email us on that or any other topic that you want to talk about. I'm told by young people in the office that they're cool, their clothes are great, this is still cool. I don't get it. I didn't get it before. I don't get it now. I'm just delivering this to you. I don't know. Email us on this, any other topics. Byline at sunmedia.ca, and lots of you did on the issue of daycare. And you is one of those. She writes, I'm a university-educated stay-at-home mom. We are not wealthy. International vacations, not an option. We are willing to sacrifice half our buying power to do what's best for our children. A national child care program would force us to subsidize Callie's lifestyle. By the way, I saw this show while visiting family. TV and internet are two luxuries we live without. Jean Duff writes about daycare nonsense in Canada and the U.S. Notwithstanding the collective will and wisdom long expressed in surveys rejecting the feminist family model with both parents in the workforce while children and youth require care and supervision, it has been fostered through favored tax policy on this side of the border. That's right. Now, Callie is the perfect example of entitlement. She has not learned the true difference between need and want. Having children means you can form your needs and your wants, such as international travel. That from Marie St. Cyr. And it's the same mentality that causes students who graduate to expect a job not proportional to their unproven worth experience. This is the generation that is raising the next one. Oh, wait, they want the state to do that. And Helen Beck writes to us to say many mothers go to work because mothering is hard work. She adds, I'm 71 years young. I was a stay-at-home mom until my 3 sons went to school. If children required care after school or Saturday, had to hire a neighbor or get my mother-in-law. Today, some mothers think they are owed. We, the taxpayer, should pick up the tab. I object. I already paid more taxes than my share. I'm going to agree there. Make sure you stop by lillyspad.ca. Final thought on Gilles Duceppe, taking 150 grand, getting more money from CBC. If he cared about the poor, he'd actually go out and volunteer instead of going on TV to talk about them.